And at 6 o'clock, everybody in England was watching Doctor Who, around 6, you know, they were 5:56, whatever. From the viewing rooms in universities to the viewing rooms in prisons, and anywhere in between. That's what you did at 6 o'clock on a Saturday. You watched Doctor Who.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember it so well, how much I looked forward to it, and how I was completely involved in those stories. I felt the Daleks were out to get me, and it feels like that again. What a lovely description of it, from family homes to prisons and all sorts of places. Terrance, you've written, I have 70 here, more than 60 novelizations of Doctor Who. Is that right?
Yes, I always used to, I'm rather disappointed. I always used to say 70 because that's a good, round, impressive number. And in fact, it's about 68 or something. You know, one of these fanatical Doctor Who fans actually counted them all up and everything, you know. And in fact, there's a chap called David Howe who's a sort of Who archivist. And he has just published a book on the Target novels, on the Target novelizations, you know, just devoted to that subject. And it is something like that. It's about 68, I think, is the real figure, but nearly 70.
Yes, well, to sound as impressive as you are, say my research team found 70, but I had a feeling it wasn't quite right. I know you have your technical team there as well. And, well, you're still writing them, so I think you're going to get to 70 soon, perhaps, because your latest Doctor Who, which I have in front of me, The Revenge of the Jadoon, which is a snippet, £1.99, I think, is part of what's called a quick read series, and it's aimed at helping adult literacy, which sort of fits in with what you were saying about everybody watching the television series. It's perhaps a book that everyone could read, and it is aimed at helping adult literacy, people who perhaps didn't get the chance at education to learn to read, perhaps people who are dyslexic, all sorts of people who this kind of real page-turning novel can help them with literacy. I've always found that very important. Could you tell us a little bit about this project?
Well, I think you've just done it, haven't you? I mean, that's basically what it is. I mean, even in the day of the novelizations, you know, which were back in the sort of 70s and 80s, they started. Although there wasn't this sort of rather more specialized thing, they were very much useful for getting kids to read. I mean, innumerable people have told me, you know, that their children wouldn't read at all, but they would read a Doctor Who book. And when the novelizations first came out, teachers and educators were kind of sniffy about them not being popular books, not being proper books, because they were based on a television show. But, you know, they did find that reluctant readers, you know, and I say it was mostly kids in those days, reluctant readers would read a Doctor Who book, you know, sort of on the back of the attraction of the television series. And this, in a sense, is a kind of extension of that, isn't it? Taking older readers who are perhaps having some problems with it. But, you know, the aim, I mean, my aim in writing always is to get people turning the page. I mean, one of my favourite writers, Stephen King, talks about when he's writing a book what he calls the gotcha. And he says, read 2 or 3 pages and I've gotcha. You know, you're going to want to turn the next page and the next. And when you finish the first chapter, you'll want to read the second one. And that really is what I've always aimed for. So this really isn't so very different for me.
Yes, I can see that. And I mean, people say it's more difficult to get boys to read. My sons love reading, actually. But I could see your books they're not just aimed at girls or boys. They're good for everyone. I certainly always loved Doctor Who. So I can see how useful they could be for school children. As you say, that page turning can help people. The other place I would see it as being useful is in learning another language, people who have English as a second language. I know when I've had to learn other languages, it really helps to have a real page-turner of a novel to help me learn the vocabulary for that language. And I think that would be very helpful at the moment too.
Yeah, something that's simple and straightforward and not too hard to get your head round would certainly be easier to tackle.
and yet still a great story. This is your second book for Quick Reads, isn't it? The first one, was that one about the Cybermen?
Yeah, Made of Steel, that was the Cybermen one. I mean, I was amazed to be asked to write that, really, because, you know, my active connection with the show really goes back a long, long time now. And, you know, as I say, most of the people now making the show grew up reading my books, you know, and lots of them have told me so, which is kind of very nice and gratifying. But I've always felt I kind of was handing it over to a new generation. So I was very pleased to be asked to write the first Quick Read, Made of Steel. And certainly never expected to be asked to do another one. But I'm rather proud of the fact that Justin Richards, my editor, said that when the time came up to set up the second book, the second Doctor Who contribution to the series, he went to Cardiff. Cardiff in Doctor Who now is rather like Rome and the Vatican, you know. Everything has to go through Cardiff. And so he went to, so I'm using it as a sort of, you know, the Who establishment is Cardiff. He went to Cardiff with a list of possible writers. And they said, we don't want to see your list. We want Terrance to write it because his last one was so good. So I was highly delighted by that. Very gratifying.
Well, Terrance, you're a Londoner like me. You studied English at university, and you've written for well-known English soaps like Crossroads, which I'll know, and the English people in the audience will know. I don't think that will have travelled to America. Maybe it should have done. And a fantastic series called The Avengers, which perhaps did. That was fabulous.
Oh yes, The Avengers did very well in America for a while. It was one of the few English shows that did.